We start with the idea that all diverse manifestations of reality originate from a common source, i.e., God, Yahweh, Brahman, Adonai, Allah, the one true Great Spirit. There's this wonderful phrase that speaks to the nature of duality, our reality, and this beautiful game of coming back to self. The one became two for the joy of becoming one again. This is our path. This is our joy. The world manifests itself as movement of matter through time and space, and this movement is subject to certain laws. So, where are the laws of the universe written? Formulas like laws are abstract constructs of the human mind designed to simplify the expression of concepts. It's improbable that nature's laws are inscribed anywhere. Could a graph be created that marked the position of all points of matter? If the graph line were to be broken up into infinitely small points, then every point could be seen as a cause and the next point as the consequent effect, whereby any movement of a point of matter through time and space could be perceived as an infinite chain of infinite examples of cause and effect. In science, we describe the movement of matter in terms of laws, but in nature, this movement exists in its natural form as an infinite flow of cause and effect. Science simplifies how nature works by using laws and formulas to explain and predict events. These models help us understand complex interactions, but in reality, nature doesn't follow static rules. It unfolds in a continuous chain of cause and effect. While science provides a useful framework, it cannot fully capture the dynamic and ever-changing process of the natural world. Generally speaking, information concerning all possible points along the path of moving matter is stored in an information field which we refer to here as the alternative space. This field contains information about everything that ever has been, is, or ever will be. We're going to refer to this field that contains the information of everything that was, is, or ever will be as the alternative space moving forward, or as the alt space, because saying alternative over and over again has proven to be quite the nemesis for my tongue. The alt space is a material information structure. It is an infinite field containing information on all possible scenarios of any event that could ever possibly take place. One could say that the alt space contains absolutely everything. We can hardly guess what form this information takes, and yet our purpose here does not require us to know this. The important thing is to establish that the alt space serves as a template or coordinate grid for the movement of all matter in time and space. We're going to explain this in more detail, but here's an overview of the alternative model. Life offers infinite realities you can choose from at any moment. You choose them by adjusting your imaginative thoughts, sincere feelings, and physical actions. Imagine this graph filled with infinite dots. Each dot is a reality, a possible moment, or a version of life. These are called sectors, and your current life is one of these sectors. Each sector has a scene and script. A series of sectors is called a lifeline. Reality Transurfing is about how you switch lifelines. It's how you choose whether you experience a favorable sector or not so desirable ones. Let's talk about scenes and scripts. Each point in space contains its own version of a given event. For the ease of understanding, let us say that each variation or version has a script and scenery. The scenery is the external form of a phenomenon, whereas the script is the path that matter moves along. For the sake of convenience, the alt space can be said to have different sectors. The greater the distance between sectors, the more the script and scenery will differ. A person's destiny also has numerous alternatives. Just like scenes in a play, each sector has a scene which makes up the reality and a script which decides how reality plays out. The more the scenery and the script changes, the more your life changes and advances. Let's provide a real-life example of a scene and script, but we'll keep the scene the same-ish in order to give the adequate contrast. In reality A, scene A, you're in an auditorium standing on stage giving a presentation to your peers. Script A. Even though it's an important presentation, you feel like it's another day at the office because you're prepared and you know what you've got. You feel confident, poised, and cracked a few in-the-moment appropriate jokes, and you have the room laughing in the palm of your hands and nodding along to every brilliant point. In Reality B, the scene is basically identical. You're in an auditorium, standing on stage, giving a presentation to your peers. Except this time, script B changes. You give this moment incredible importance, thinking it will make or break your career. You're nervous and worried about what everyone thinks of you. You tell no jokes and try to sound as professional as possible, coming off monotone and unenthusiastic. You feel like you're losing the audience, and it throws you off your game. You can see that now two separate lifelines have diverged from one sector. One where you're now revered as a public speaker, and the other where you've psyched yourself out and you feel like you flopped on an important event in your career. Theoretically speaking, there are no limits to the scripts and sceneries of human existence because the alt space is infinite. Any seemingly insignificant event can affect a twist of fate. A person's life, just like any other movement of matter, represents a chain of cause and effect events. In the alt space, the effect is always located in close proximity to its cause. The sector of a person's destiny creates a lifeline. The scripts and settings of the sectors on one line are more or less uniform. A person's life flows evenly in one direction until such time an event occurs that changes the scripts and sceneries. When this happens, destiny takes a turn and shifts to another lifeline. Reality has such diversity of form because the number of alternatives for its manifestation is limitless. Any starting point for one or another form of manifestation results in a chain of cause and effect relationships. One could say that reality unfolds based on the initial starting point chosen, and ultimately, everyone experiences the outcome of their choices. You have the right to choose precisely because an eternal number of alternatives already exists. No one is preventing you from choosing the destiny you would feel comfortable having. Managing your own destiny comes down to one single thing: making the choice. Transurfing shows you how to make that choice. A little review. An information structure exists that contains an infinite number of potential alternatives, each with its own unique script and scenery. This means that the way things appear and change in the real world is predetermined by the information encoded in that structure. The process of transformation into the physical reality corresponds to a blueprint or pattern already set within the information structure. The physical world materializes according to the instructions laid out in this underlying framework. This reality materializes based on the segment of the lifeline you're currently living through. The following is an analogy for the material realization of reality from the alt space. Imagine a pipe filled with water with a cooling ring that moves along the pipe, freezing the area it passes over and unfreezing it as it moves along. The water in the pipe serves as an analogy for the alt space, and the crystal of ice as an analogy for the material manifestation of a particular alternative. The water stays in the same place, it is only the cooling ring that moves. The effect of the cooling ring makes it look as if a crystal of ice is moving through the water as the cooling ring slowly moves along the pipe, freezing the area it passes. The water molecules themselves don't travel down the pipe, they stay mostly in the same place. The cooling ring creates the appearance of movement by freezing and unfreezing different sectors of water as it moves along. The ice crystal is not a single chunk floating through the water, instead it's the potential for ice that moves as the cooling ring creates and dissolves the frozen state in different areas. The wave is another analogy for the process of physical manifestation in which the sea is the alt space and the wave is the material realization of a given alternative. Take a wave that forms in the sea after an earthquake. It looks like the wave is moving across the surface of the sea in a hump, but in fact, the water remains in the same place. It is not a mass of water that is moving along the sea so much as the energetic potential for transformation into physical reality. It is only when the accumulation of water finally reaches the shore that it breaks on the ground. Any other wave behaves in the same manner. The movement of the wave is symbolic of how transformation in reality occurs. the buildup of potential eventually becomes physical, much like how our ideas, intentions, or alternatives in the mind take shape in the material world when the right conditions are met. Does this mean that material manifestation moves through time and space, while the potential alternatives remain in one place for eternity in the space of everything that was, is, and will be? Sure, why not? Time of itself is as static as space. The passing of time is only felt when it turns like film footage, one shot following another. If you unroll the film and look at all the frames put together, there is no time because all the frames exist simultaneously. Time is static until we start looking at each frame in sequence. It is the same in life, which is why the idea that everything comes and goes is so deeply rooted in our minds. Everything that has ever happened or will happen exists permanently in the field of information, like frames on a reel of film. The past doesn't vanish, and the future already exists, even if it hasn't been experienced yet. What you see and experience right now is just the materialized part of your life's timeline drawn from this vast field of possibilities. This idea might be slightly weird, and you may be asking yourself, how is it possible for countless alternatives of your own fate to exist simultaneously in stasis? Who is responsible for this? God or the laws of nature, perhaps? Now let's do this mental exercise. Imagine a point on a coordinate grid which can exist at any x and y coordinate from negative to positive infinity. We accept this without questioning why the point has the freedom to exist anywhere on the grid. Now, imagine the point moving along the function line. If the point could think, it might wonder, how can the path I've traveled always have existed, and how can the path I'm about to take already be set? To the point, this might seem strange, but for you, observing from above, it's clear. You can see the entire path as part of the grid, a perspective the point itself lacks. The alt space is like a blueprint for how physical reality can appear. Imagine walking through a dark forest with a flashlight. The forest represents the entire alt space, while the area illuminated by your flashlight is part of the reality that becomes visible and real to you. The question remains as to what provides the light. In other words, what ignites, i.e. materializes a particular alternative within the template? What causes one specific possibility to light up and become real? To answer this question, we need to take a different starting point. Nowadays, most people agree that thoughts are material. There's also much evidence that reality takes two forms. On one hand, material existence defines consciousness, and on the other hand, there is clear evidence that consciousness defines physical existence. Therefore, thoughts not only provide the motivation for human action, they also have a direct influence on our reality. So much evidence exists not only in everyday life, but also in experiments of quantum physics to indicate the direct impact of thoughts on reality. I put together a little starter pack of things you can take a look into for yourself. One way or another, individual consciousness plays a key role in shaping a person's destiny. This material and training focuses on how thought energy transforms possibilities into physical reality. Reality can take any form defined by consciousness, as evidenced by everyday life and quantum physics experiments. While the exact mechanism of how thought interacts with the alt space isn't fully understood, we will work with the idea that thought energy lights up a specific sector in the alt space. This connection causes one possibility to become physical reality. Thought waves align with sectors that match their quality, manifesting those alternatives in the physical world. This is how consciousness creates reality. One should bear in mind that this is only one way of manifesting reality. Generally speaking, it's not possible to create the reality you desire simply by sitting in one place and contemplating it. Actions are part of the equation. Although people do exist who are capable of materializing objects literally out of thin air, they are very few in number and as a rule do not advertise their abilities. Nonetheless, thoughts have as much impact on a person's destiny as concrete actions do. It's all about allowing the mirror of reality to meet you halfway, and you will walk the rest. People are used to the idea that there's a visible and clearly comprehensible connection between their actions and the consequences of them. By contrast, the impact of one's thoughts manifests imperceptibly and so appears inexplicable and unpredictable. It might seem difficult to determine a causal relationship between one's thoughts and the following events, but soon you will see the connection is quite direct. A person gets what they choose. Some might think that we're saying that the seas, mountains, planets, and galaxies are all created by personal thoughts. However, this is not the case. People often see themselves as the center of the universe, but in reality, they are just a small part of infinite space. Reality is shaped collectively by billions of living beings, each contributing their own unique energy. If you're not comfortable viewing plants as capable of thought, then you can refer to the process differently. It does not change the nature of the phenomenon. No one can say for sure that even inanimate objects lack an energy similar to the thought energy of living beings, let alone the universal spirit, often called God, that connects everything. Every being has its own consciousness, shaping its own layer of the world. In this sense, everything carries a piece of God through which the entire world is governed. We all share the same world, but each person follows their unique path. The physical world's qualities are constant for everyone, but how it manifests differs for each individual. For instance, imagine that you're a tourist enjoying a beautiful city, admiring the architecture, parks, and smiling faces. Nearby, a homeless man sees a completely different reality. An empty bottle in the trash, a rival eyeing it, and a watchful policeman. Though you're in the same city and dimension, your perspectives reflect different life paths. Your lifelines intersect briefly, but you each experience the world in your own unique way. All manifestation of material nature has an energetic foundation. The energy field is primary, and the physical manifestation is secondary. Scientists attempt to unite different manifestations of energy within the context of a single theory, and soon they will achieve good results. However, they will find that they have to keep adding many more things to the theory because reality takes an infinite number of forms. Without going into too much detail, we will take energy to be an abstract force which is invisible but nonetheless exists. For our purposes, it is enough to accept the fact that the energy of the human thought is material. Thought energy does not just spin around inside a person's head, it flows out into the space beyond the head and interacts with the wider energy field around us. Few would dispute this fact now. For convenience sake, we can talk about the parameter of thought energy that is frequency, just as radio waves have a frequency. Whenever you think about something in particular, the frequency of your thoughts becomes attuned to a certain area within the alt space. When the thought energy reaches the relevant sector in the alt space, the potential reality held within that sector begins to materialize. A little bit more of a detailed explanation is as follows. Energy has a highly complex structure and it flows through everything in the world. When energy passes through the human body, it is modified by that person's thoughts. By the time it exits the body, it has acquired the same parameter as the thoughts. A radio transmitter works in the same way. Energy absorbs the characteristics of the thoughts of one's mind. When energy exits the human body, it radiates outwards in a thought wave that in turn transforms the sector of the alt space into physical reality. It's not so much that we actually attract things in our lives, it's that we vibrate at the frequency of that particular alternative reality and it appears into form. Whenever you think about something, be it negative or positive, you are radiating thought energy in the alt space. Modified energy accumulates in a specific sector of the field, and this has the effect of introducing corresponding changes in your life. If a person has a hostile attitude towards the world, they will find the world responds to them with the same. If a person constantly expresses dissatisfaction, they'll find more and more reasons to be dissatisfied. If a person's attitude to life is predominantly negative, the world will show them the worst side of its nature. On the other side, having a positive attitude is the most natural way to change your life for the better. People get what they choose. Like it or not, this is how life works. Your thoughts keep you on the same life path until your perspective changes. When your attitude shifts, your thought energy changes, moving your reality to a different path. When you shift to a new lifeline, events unfold according to your thoughts. If you dislike the new reality, it can be difficult to change. People often react negatively to obstacles, becoming frustrated or despairing, which only reinforces their thought energy onto a lifeline with even more challenges. This makes negativity in life feel like a very slippery slope. It might seem as if this process cannot be controlled, but in fact, the individual is in control, and it's their own thoughts that are directing the path of material realization into problematic areas of the alt space. People think that obstacles can be overcome by actions, but in actual fact, they ultimately experience whatever their dominant thoughts are. So, if you choose to battle against the obstacles on your path, you will experience an abundance of obstacles. If you're absorbed by thoughts of your own problems, you will find that there's always problems in your life. Keep this rule in the back of your mind. As the call, so the echo. To illustrate the previous points, here are some examples. If you focus on financial struggles, you'll find more situations where money feels scarce. If your thoughts are consumed with fear or failure, you'll continually face scenarios where success feels out of reach. If you think about being overwhelmed by responsibilities, your life will mirror that with increased tasks. If you dwell on not being appreciated, you'll notice more instances where people seem to undervalue your efforts. If you fixate on health worries, you'll experience more situations where your health appears to be at risk. Each example illustrates how dominant thoughts shape the reality you experience. It may seem like you can't control this process, but in reality, your thoughts shape the path your life takes. If you focus on obstacles or problems, you'll encounter more of them. Taking action alone won't change the underlying script of your life, it only reinforces what you're focused on. To truly change, you must shift your thoughts towards a different, more positive script rather than fixating on what you don't want. What you think about is ultimately what you experience. You cannot change anything about the current lifeline, just as in an art gallery, you cannot take away or reconstruct exhibitions that are not to your taste as you're not the owner. However, no one is to stop you from turning around and walking into the next room to look at something you can appreciate more. Of course, the shift to a lifeline in which everyone gets what they want on demand does not happen simply by wishing for it. Not all thoughts can be realized, and not all desires are fulfilled. The reason for this is not the content of a person's thoughts so much as their quality. A dream or a wish does not qualify as a choice. Dreams do not come true. To create the reality you want, you have to observe certain conditions which you'll learn about later in this training. Throughout the infinite, forces are in perfect balance, and hence the energy of a single thought may determine the motion of a universe. Nikola Tesla. The alt space contains an infinite number of possible lifelines for every individual. No one should feel hard done by if they do not like their fate, because everyone has the right to choose. The problem is that we don't know how to choose. The world has such diversity of form, one would think it was created to satisfy any need. Everyone can find whatever their heart desires. But people argue with each other, trying to force others to accept their relationship to the world, and yet the world shows that they are all right. Is that not wonderful? The alt space is the so-called illusion, and material realization is what is meant by physical reality. We always get what we choose. Those who are familiar with the principles of Islam will understand what is meant by a person's fate is written in the book. This means that a person's fate is preordained and cannot be changed. While there's truth to this, the misconception lies in the idea that there's only one version of fate. In reality, there are countless alternatives. You cannot alter the script of any specific version, and struggling to change it is exhausting and futile. Instead, the key is to shift your focus and choose a different, more favorable alternative. Of course, this is all quite strange, and you may quite reasonably have your doubts. We do not expect anyone to accept the alt model just like that. You just need to try and have it work for you. It makes no sense to give preference to one model of the universe over another just for the sake of some absolute truth. It is not the model itself that has meaning so much as what it can help you achieve. Different mathematical models can illustrate the same physical phenomenon in different ways. It would be quite hilarious if specialists in analytical geometry suddenly took up arms against mathematical analysis and tried to prove that geometry is the only true mathematical discipline. Mathematicians have been able to agree amongst themselves, but philosophers and religious leaders have not. It is difficult to say where the old space actually is. From the point of view of our three-dimensional reality, one could say that it is everywhere and nowhere. Imagine a flat, endless surface where two-dimensional beings live. They can't imagine a third dimension because their world seems like all there is. But we know there's a third dimension and that countless other surfaces like theirs could exist. Similarly, it's okay if you can't imagine infinite parallel worlds beyond our own. It's simply a matter of perspective. It is hard to believe in the existence of parallel worlds. Having said that, how easy is it to believe in the theory of relativity, which claims that an accelerating body increases its mass, reduces its size, and slows down the time through which it moves? It is impossible to test the theory firsthand, but that does not matter. It does not matter whether we understand a theory. What matters is the practical benefit that can be derived from it. The theory of the Big Bang suggests the universe began with a massive explosion and has been expanding ever since. While celestial bodies move at incredible speeds, the vast distances in space make this expansion appear very slow to us. It is also a well-established fact that in a vacuum at any given moment in time, elementary particles are born out of nowhere and then immediately disappear. We do not yet know the exact structure of elementary particles, but given the relativity of time and space, there is nothing to stop us perceiving each particle as if it were a separate universe like our own. The further one goes into the microcosm, the more relative distances appear huge, and for the internal observer, time slows down. To an external observer, our universe might appear to last for just one brief moment, like a particle birthed and extinguished in a vacuum, whereas we, as its internal observers, perceive the universe to have been in existence for billions of years. They say the Planck length is the smallest possible meaningful distance in physics. In comparison, the Planck length is to an atom what an atom is to the entire observable universe. This helps illustrate how mind-bogglingly small the fundamental scales of reality can be. And so the next time you take a mouthful of coffee, ask yourself how many universes you have just swallowed. Infinity cannot be divided into parts, and so if you think about it, every time you swallow a mouthful of coffee, you are swallowing an infinite number of universes. Flying through a microcosm can take as long and seem as far as it does flying through the boundless expanse of outer space. Time, like space, goes on for infinity, whether you look backwards or forwards. Intervals of time can be as infinitely large as they can be infinitely small. Any point within a time interval can be seen as a reference point, both sides of which extend into infinity of time. Changing the reference point to another place within the time interval does not change the extent of infinity in either direction. The infinity of worlds within worlds exists simultaneously. The center of the universe is at the same time to be found in every point of matter because every point is surrounded by infinity on all sides. All events exist concurrently for the same reason that the center of the universe is located in every point at the same time. This is difficult to imagine, but so is it impossible to grasp infinity in one moment of contemplation. Even more convoluted theories have been designed which claim that the visible universe becomes a finite sphere in fourth-dimensional space, but this does not help particularly because, theoretically speaking, an infinite number of dimensions could exist. Unable to clearly imagine all of this, we have to content ourselves with a narrower perspective and at least pretend we understand some of these theories. There are many things about contemporary science that are impossible to explain or comprehend. However, this should not prevent us from benefiting from the fruits of scientific thinking. Applying the principles of transurfing can lead to stunning results. The important thing is to decide from the very beginning not to torture yourself with the question of why and how exactly it all works, which would be as productive as a child asking a physicist why different bodies attract. The scientist would reply, because of the law of gravity. The child then follows with the next question, how does the law of gravity work? Why do bodies attract? There is no answer to this question, so we will leave the thankless task of trying to explain these things, for it is not ours to know and understand everything. We will simply enjoy the results of the alt model. From the alt model, it follows that man can create his own destiny. In transurfing, the concept of fate differs from other more widely accepted interpretations. The difference is that in the context of transurfing, a person can choose their happiness. They do not have to fight for their place under the sun. There is no need to accept or reject the alt model straight away. First, ask yourself this question: have you achieved much by battling with the world to find happiness? Each person will decide for themselves whether they wish to carry on in the same vein or whether they would prefer trying to use a different method. A person can spend their entire life battling without achieving anything at all. Would it not be simpler to act in a way that encourages life to meet you halfway, for all it does is help manifest your personal choice? Whatever your order, your choice is always granted unconditionally. Choice, however, is different to desire. Wishes are only granted in fairy tales, and most people just keep on wishing. It is no wonder that the belief is so ingrained in our minds that wishes are very difficult, if not impossible to fulfill. And so, dear Maker, we have already taken the first small step towards solving the Guardian's riddle. Soon, you'll find out why wishes are not granted and dreams do not come true.